Hi, fourth grade, and welcome back. Today we are working on Lesson 2 of Voting for chapters 3, 4, and 5. Today we're learning to understand what happens on Election Day, the effects of the votes, and how you can get involved in voting, even when we aren't old enough to vote just quite yet. We know we'll be successful when we're able to explain where and how you vote, how votes are counted, and how winners are announced, as well as how you can stay informed and get involved with voting practices. Okay, we have some different vocab today. Our first word is identification. So, identification is a document or other item that proves who a person is. Very common identification would be your driver's license when you're old enough. You guys might have something like a birth certificate. This proves that that's who you are, and then people can identify you. The next vocab word is absentee ballot. This is a voting form filled out and sent in by a voter who could not be present at his or her polling station on election day. Your next word is stylus. This is a small stick used like a pen to input data to some devices. I'm sure lots of you have used a stylus before, maybe on iPads or other electronics that you have. Your next word is partitions. These are movable walls or panels used to divide a room or area. We call them sneeze guards, but those could also be considered a partition that we have where it kind of gives you your own area or space in classrooms. Anything that kind of divides that can be a partition. And our last word is elector. This is a member of the U.S. Electoral College who casts a vote for the president. Okay, chapter 3, Election Day. So voters wait for a big day to arrive, Election Day. Election Day is the day set aside by local, state, or national law to hold an election. Presidential elections occur every 4 years on the first Tuesday following the first Monday of November. Local elections, which concern a much smaller population than presidential elections, may occur in different months or years. Registered voters visit their local polling places on Election Day. Public schools, libraries, churches, and other buildings are often used as polling places. Then it says Election Day always falls between November 2nd and 8th. And then many kinds of buildings serve as polling places on Election Day. So Election Day is coming up, and this year it is very important because this year we are having a presidential election year. Okay, so at the polling place. Requirements for checking in at the polling place differ from state to state. Voters can find the requirements by contacting their state's Board of Elections. After arriving at the polling place, a voter waits in line to see a clerk. She might have to show identification, such as a driver's license, to prove who she is. The clerk shows or checks off the voter's name on the registration list. This ensures that each voter casts only one vote. Voters sometimes have to sign a poll book or other document to check in. Okay, so they do that on purpose to make sure that someone can't go in and throw a bunch of votes under whatever they would like to have happen. Long distance voting. Sometimes people are not able to vote in person at their assigned polling place on Election Day. The reasons may include travel, illness, or injury. In these cases, a voter can ask his registrar for an absentee ballot. A paper ballot arrives by U.S. mail. The voter completes the ballot and mails it back to his registrar's office. Absentee ballots contain the same list of candidates and issues as the ballots used at the polling place. Casting the vote. Different polling places use different voting methods. Some use mark-sense ballots. Voters use a black marker to color in an empty oval, circle, or rectangle next to an issue or a candidate's name. When they are finished voting, they feed the ballot into a computer. Their computer records the dark circles on the ballots as votes. And over here it says the modern secret ballot was first used in Australia in 1856, and special computers are used to scan mark-sense ballots. Many towns use direct recording electronic, so DRE, voting systems. A voter receives a pass card from the clerk to insert into the computer. The touchscreen lists an issue or the candidates for an office. The voter touches yes or no for an issue or the name of the candidate. When the voter presses end, the computer records the votes and the pass card pops out. When the voter returns the pass card, then the voter returns the pass card to the clerk. So these DRE machines use touchscreens to record their votes. Some polling places use punch card ballots. Voters are given a ballot card, then they clip onto a metal device. They use the device's stylus to poke holes to indicate the candidates or issues they support. After voting, they feed their ballot into a computer. The computer reads the punched holes and records the votes. So punch card voting requires the use of special machines, and then you can see the picture of how it punches there. Lever machines are another method of voting. A voter steps up to the machine and pulls a large lever that closes a privacy curtain. To cast a vote, the voter pulls down small levers located above the candidates' names. When there are issues on the ballot, the voter pulls the lever for yes or no. When the voter pulls the large lever again to open the curtain, the votes are recorded inside the machine. So it says lever machines were invented in the 1890s. In some places, paper ballots are used. Voters simply write an X next to the names of their chosen candidates. They place an X besides yes or no when they are voting on issues. In all of these voting methods, privacy is very important. Booths, curtains, and partitions are used to ensure that voters can mark their ballots in secret. They want to make sure that you're not influencing your friends or someone's able to influence you. So that's why they want to make sure you have a lot of secrecy when you're doing that. And it says down there, most voters do not want other people to see who they vote for. Each state determines the hours for voting. Some polling places are open from 6 a.m. until 8 or 9 p.m. This ensures that everyone can find a time to vote, even if they have busy schedules. In some elections, there is heavy turnout with many people waiting in line to vote. When this happens, special permission may be given to keep polling places open later so everyone has a chance to vote. And there it says lines often form at polling places during the busiest parts of the day. So, explain the process of giving a vote on election day. There are a lot of right answers as we talked about all the different ways that different places may vote. You can talk about just one of them. What's one way that you can cast a vote on election day? Okay, Chapter 4, Keeping Count. Counting the votes correctly is an important part of any election. When the poll closes, volunteers at each polling place collect the vote totals. Polling places that use computerized ballots generally have totals that are produced automatically. If paper ballots were used, the volunteers count each one by hand. Oh, I'm glad I'm not in charge of that job. Here it says the first U.S. presidential election took place between 1788 and 1789. And you see a picture that says volunteers carefully count each ballot after the polls close. Announcing the winners. Depending on how many votes must be counted, it can take several hours to determine the winner. When clerks at each polling place have finished counting the votes, the results are announced to the public. People learn the results through television, internet, newspapers, and radios. Voters who follow their favorite candidates on Facebook or Twitter can also watch those sites for the announcement. And there it says news programs and websites devote several hours on election night to announcing the result of nationwide elections. Page 37. National elections occur on the same day all across the United States. Presidential elections are national elections that involve voting for the president and vice president. Congressional elections are local and sometimes statewide elections for members of Congress. In these elections, millions of votes must be counted. Sometimes it is very late at night or early the next morning before the public knows who won. And here is a picture. It says in the presidential election of 2000, it took 36 days to find out who won. And it says candidates often hold rallies on election night as they wait for the election results. Okay, the Electoral College. Presidential elections are different from other elections in the way the winner is determined. In the United States, citizens do not vote directly for the president. The vote that is cast actually goes towards an elector who is pledged to a certain candidate. So electors gather together and form the Electoral College. Each state has a certain number of electors based on its population. The larger a state's population, the more electors it gets. Some states have as few as 3 electors, while others have as many as 55. So it all depends on population. In some states, the candidate who wins the popular vote gets all of the state's electoral votes. The exceptions are Maine and Nebraska, which can split their electoral votes. During a presidential race, the electors do not cast their actual votes until after the popular election when the Electoral College meets. There are 538 total electoral votes available, and a presidential candidate needs to win more than half of them to win the election. So down below, we see a timeline of the U.S. voting history. So in 1787, the U.S. Constitution was signed, which we learned about. In 1870, it says the 15th Amendment grants African American men the right to vote. Then in 1920, the 19th Amendment grants women the right to vote. 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act grants the U.S.-born Native Americans U.S. citizens, and thus they are given the right to vote. And then in 2008, more than 130 million people vote in the U.S. presidential election. So you can kind of see over time, voting is really important. It's really important because we weren't always given those rights to vote. In some countries, not everyone's able to vote or choose who their leaders are. So it is very important to go out and make sure that you vote. So your next journal question is, how are presidential elections or the electoral college different from other elections that may happen in your city? So go back, think about the electoral college. How is it different, and how does that voting work a little differently than other elections that may happen? Chapter 5, getting involved. Even though you can't vote in local, state, or national elections until you're 18, you can be involved in politics right now. Become active in classroom or school elections. Accompany an adult to the polls. You can discuss the candidates and issues in upcoming elections. Do you have opinions about the candidates? Which issues do they support? What kinds of campaign promises do they make? These are all really good questions to be asking your parents right now as we have a presidential election coming up. So before 1971, the legal voting age was 21. And schools often hold election for student government positions. This is a really good way to start getting involved. Okay, other ways are to get to know your government. Ask an adult to help you learn more about the elected officials in your community. You can write emails or letters to these officials. Tell them what you think they should do about issues that concern you. You might also be able to convince the candidate to visit your school. So politicians often visit schools to help educate students about important issues. And here you can see Barack Obama visiting a school. Page 43. When a candidate you like is running for office, volunteer to help adults put up posters and yard signs around your community. You can help out at campaign headquarters too. Dedicated helpers are always needed to help with basic office tasks. You might find yourself getting caught up in the excitement of the campaign. Someday, you might even run for office yourself. So up there, the caption says, even if you are too young to vote, you can help support your favorite candidate in other ways. Here is a list of different true statistics. So, number of people in the United States who voted in the 2008 election was more than 130 million people. The state with the highest number of electors is California. They have 55, whereas the states with the lowest number of electors is Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. They each get 3. The first people to choose their leaders by voting were ancient Greeks, who lived more than 2,500 years ago. And the first people to vote by secret ballot were ancient Romans about 2,000 years ago. The only state where people do not have to register to vote is North Dakota. And state where the most U.S. presidents were born is Virginia. The youngest person to ever serve as president was Theodore Roosevelt at age 42 in 1901. And the oldest person ever elected president was Ronald Reagan at age 69 in 1980. Okay, your last journal question for today is, what are some things you would like to know about your government or the upcoming presidential election? Thank you, 4th grade, and have a wonderful rest of your day.